Okay, so it's a real pleasure for me to welcome the second panel of the day on digitalization of ports at the heart of supply chain. So we are a mix of people, here with different kind of experience, and it will be interesting to jump now. We had the presentation of Julie Gascon. She was at the beginning of the discussion. So the moderator will be Mathieu Saint-Pierre. So Mathieu is the president and CEO of the Société de développement économique du Saint-Laurent, la SODES, since 2020. He's responsible for overseeing the administration and federating the players in the maritime industry. So thank you, Mathieu, for being here with us. So as a panelist, we have Seth Gikema. He's a professor in the departments of Civil and Environmental Engineering and Industrial Operation Engineering at the University of Michigan, and he's the co-director of the Center for Risk Analysis Informed Decision Engineering. We have Larissa Fenn she's Vice President Corporate Affairs at OPA Port, so from Hamilton, leading a team responsible for communication and government relations, strategic initiative, corporate governance, and culture. Thank you, Larissa, for being with us today. She came by train yesterday, not by boat. And we have Magali Amiel. She's directrice conseil expert for Canada at CGI. She has a PhD in geography, transport, and logistics from the University of Montreal. And Magali describes herself as atypical. So it follows a very strong thread of good movement, strategy, and innovation. She was fascinated by logistics and transportation. And I think it will be a very good panel. So Mathieu, the floor is yours.
Alors, merci Nathalie, merci pour l'invitation, merci pour la confiance pour modérer ce panel. So, thank you, good afternoon everyone. So, as you can hear, my English is not very perfect, so I will try to do my best this afternoon. So for that, I will take my notes. So thank you. So the SODES is a non-profit organization, and the mandate, as Nathalie said, is to unite and rely Quebec maritime ecosystem around economic, environmental, and social issue or opportunities. So as part of this mandate, we have been active for several years now with the use and valuation of data, mainly at two levels, past data and real-time data. So in terms of using and leveraging past data, in 2016 with Innovation Maritime, we initiated the Maritime Information System to address the problem of lack of data affecting the Quebec maritime sector. So the MIS was established to collect, process, analyze, and disseminate high-quality shipping traffic data that is beneficial for communities, government, and the maritime sector. So the MIS provides Quebec with a set of historical data that can be used to track changes in the sector and serve as a basic for the development of new analytical approaches using the AI tools, while also helping to develop public policy. So real-time data exchange and sharing. So for this point, SODES is laying the foundation for a neutral management entity for data sharing between maritime organizations. So based on the best practices and aspirations identified by Quebec's maritime and logistic sector, we are drawing inspiration for FLOW, US part, and One Record, EU part. So in this context, I'm delighted to be moderating this afternoon panel. So during this panel, we will discuss the challenges and opportunities of port digitalization in the St. Lawrence and Great Lakes region. We will focus on the crucial role of data and emerging technologies in optimizing port logistics and supply chain. Finally, we will explore the competitive advantage of these technological approaches and highlight the importance of data deriving insights for both public and private decision making. So I propose you a 3-steps approach. First of all, an academic part, an advisory part, and an operational point of view to define and clarify the digitalization in the sector. So first, for his presentation, please welcome Mr. Dikema.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I got to grab the clicker. So I'm going to talk at a high level about challenges and opportunities in port digitization, but I'm going to come at this maybe slightly differently. So a bit about me, because we all come with our own perspectives. I'm an engineer, not an economist, so I think about things in a very engineering way sometimes, but I'm also very interdisciplinary in how I try to work on these things. So a lot of my work focuses on interdependent infrastructure, digital twin modeling, risk and resilience analysis, and how do we do that in a way that actually helps people make better decisions? Now, I'm also maybe a weird academic, at least in the US, and that I do a lot of non-academic work. I worked for a startup in California for 5 years. I worked for the government. I had various other things. So let's think about why digitize. But when I think about this more broadly across lots of different types of infrastructure, what are the benefits of digitization? Well, of course, increased efficiency, right? That's one of the big reasons why we think we want to digitize things. But I would argue we also get much more nimble and adaptive systems if we can get good real-time data, and it's that good that can be a challenge. I work a lot with power utilities and water utilities, entities like that. They can get data. It's not always good data, and that poses some challenges. Another big reason what we often think about is cost reductions, right? So not just operational efficiency, but can we reduce the cost of doing things? Potentially better integration with broader supply chains. I also do quite a bit of research on supply chain resilience. And at least in the US, I worked quite a bit with the US military on supply chains. They don't know what their supply chain is. And if you don't know what your supply chain is, one, it's hard to digitize it, but two, it's hard to really ensure resilience of it. And perhaps, maybe, improve security. There's some issues with that. Okay, so an example from a different infrastructure, drinking water systems. So drinking water systems, at least in the US, are pretty old school. Like there's one utility we were working with, they serve about 1.8 million people. I asked them, well, how do you do pump controls? Well, if we want to change a pump, a guy has to get in a pickup, drive out there, turn a knob, and then drive back to the office. I'm like, really? There's no digital control. There's no SCADA system, right? Supervisory control and data acquisition. So sometimes digitization is the simple step of, can I get a sensor to tell me what's going on? I still don't have active control. So when we talk about digitization, is it information flow? Is it control? And then could we make the next step and say, it's going to be predictive with like AI or something like that? What we found in this sector, when you digitize, is yeah, it makes the system a lot more adaptive and efficient, but it also opened up this huge security hole. We had this increase in attacks against pumps where people were hacking in and taking control of pumps, ramp them up to their maximum speed, and then you destroy the pump. And that happened to water utilities in the US because they didn't have the security holes plugged when they digitized their pump controls. This is a relatively simple thing. It's a pump. It's a water pump, right? It's not a whole port. It's not even a whole water system. The other thing is it required substantial investment. Some of these pumps were 50 plus years old and weren't equipped to handle this. So as we digitize, can our systems take it and how much is it going to cost us to get there? Okay, I'm going to transition and talk about AI. A lot of my research is on AI. AI doesn't have to come with digitization, but it can. Right? If we digitize, now we can get the information we might want or need for doing AI-based work. So in a very broad sense, it's use of computer algorithms to kind of mimic human thinking. It's been around for a long time, right? You can trace it back into the 1970s. What's changed is that we now have the computing power to really do it in a much more meaningful way. You've probably seen pictures like this, right? You've got AI, you've got machine learning, you've got deep learning, and then I'd say now we have a new bubble within deep learning, which is large language models. So be careful when you say AI what you mean. So what are some of the benefits of AI? Well, there's some overlap, right? More efficient use of data relative to some of our other methods. Potentially improved predictive, actually. I do a lot of work developing predictive models for infrastructure systems that get run over by disruptions of all sorts of different types. Potentially deeper insights into the relationships, and potentially better integration with sensing and other information systems. So when has it been most successful? Well, when we have large training sets, we need that, But these training sets have to be representative of future conditions. If I have really good past data and I change my system, my AI model might be really good at predicting what's going to happen in the system I no longer have. That's not so useful to support decision making. And the relationship between the feature space, the X, and the Y, the response variable, has to stay the same. If it doesn't, I might be predicting for something that no longer exists. So just because it's AI doesn't mean it solves our problem. I've trained really good AI models, at least I think they're good, for power utilities to predict power outages. Then they go in, they look at our model and say, we've got a problem, we're going to go harden the system, we're going to put in stronger poles. Now my model's not accurate anymore because it's predicting for a system that doesn't exist. So we have to be really careful that when we do AI, as we digitize, that we're doing it well. Checking time. Okay, so what are some of the challenges? Well, getting enough data. Particularly data includes the sorts of disruptions that we're concerned about. If I were to try to use an AI to predict the effects of certain sorts of tariffs that we've never seen before, can my AI do that? Well, depends. How am I training it? But we also need data representative of future events. If we want to do AI to predict water levels in the Great Lakes, I had a PhD student that I worked with at Michigan that was doing some of this stuff. And we see things that are outside the bounds of anything we've seen before. Will our AI actually catch that? There's a risk that it's not going to. And if the relationship between X and Y are non-stationary, then we have a problem. X and Y could each be non-stationary. It's that relationship that is the issue. And then we shouldn't underestimate, and I think this is maybe the most important limitation, conveying the results in a way that decision makers actually understand and can actually use. So I also do a lot of consulting. And a lot of that time, yeah, we can develop our AI models, but then how do we get it to the point where people actually understand what they are and what they're doing and what the uncertainties are? There's a whole field of explainable AI that I think in some ways creates a whole new set of things that are not explainable. At least to real decision makers. I understand them, I think. But practical decision makers struggle to understand what it is we're doing when we do this sort of stuff. So my bottom line is that yes, digitization can help improve efficiency in operations across lots of different settings. AI layered on top of that has the potential to do this even more, but we have to be really careful. We have to be careful that we're not misleading decision makers with models that appear accurate but might not be in those future conditions. It's that out of sample, truly out of sample. And we have to be really careful about the security risks. This is something, at least in the US, infrastructure systems are realizing more and more. They are targets of lots of different actors. And when they digitize, they create new targets. And they don't necessarily have the expertise to secure those targets. And they're having pumps hacked and all sorts of things like that. There's also, as that computer system meltdown last summer that grounded airlines all over the place showed us, there's some risks with increased reliance on computing electric power and algorithms. What happens when the system goes down? Do we have a backup? Is this really a resilient system? So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to the next person.
Yep, thank you. So thank you, Monsieur Guillermo. So secondly, for presentation and point of view, Magali Amiel de CGI.
So my name is Magali from CGI, and as Nathalie mentioned, I'm a geographer. First, before technology, before transport and logistics, I'm a geographer, a proud geographer. What does it mean today? I love geopolitics, transports, goods movements, and what's happening into economy. So for me, it's really funny time right now. Not for my clients, not from some of my colleagues, but for me, really interesting. So this afternoon, we talk about what is happening into the Saint-Laurent and Great Lakes corridor, a fascinating corridor. Why? Just think about that. We have, and I really like what Jolie Gascon mentioned this morning, it's a maritime nation. We have a beautiful access by water, by the river, into one of the biggest economy in the world. We have airports, railways, trucking industry, and we have manufacturers and exporters. All this in the same areas. But what do we miss? And that's what we are here today. That's really good information system. Trusted data. trusted data is really key right now. We are not agile, and I think I had a discussion with one of our colleagues here, why we are not agile right now, and we are people struggling with really big issues, is because we cannot rely on the data that we have to take decision, strategic decision and tactic decision. So I have some of my colleagues from around the world, because for who don't know CGI, we are really on the leader company on IT and technology around the world, and we offer end-to-end services from business consulting to managed services. And I have colleagues in Europe, in Asia, and they call me and say, Magali, what's happened? Because when we look at the other region, especially in Europe, because we have really interesting project in the area of Antwerp, Rotterdam, Hamburg, and also into the Mediterranean with ports and supply chain. They say, you don't have data. You don't have real-time data that you can use to help your organization. And unfortunately for us, the answer today is no. So 3 points that I want to share with you today. I don't have any presentation because I'm a last-time runner into the panel, but I think it's really important. One of the biggest challenges that we have from Eastern Canada to the Great Lakes, it's really an emergency to digitize. Maybe you can raise your hand. How many organizations do you think they have fully automated to have access to the data across our ecosystem? Do you think it's, okay, we'll say A, it's 50% and plus of the organization, B, it's less than, between 10 and 50, and less than 10%. So for A, 50% and plus of the ports have fully automated access to the data. Do you think, yes, no? B, between 10 and 50, less than 10. Right? That's where we are today. And we compete with organizations around the world that are more than 60% of automation. It's one of our biggest. When Julie Gassion-Cohn this morning said we need to invest, she's right. We are not where we should be. We are not where our competition is. That's what's happening in Europe, in Asia. We are lucky. In the US, they are like us. So that's the good news, the only good news. So it's really important to digitize, really important to work on data, really important also to have not one strategy, because strategy is for organization, but one vision for the corridor. What we want to achieve with the data into the corridor. Why? Because if we say we have a strategy for all the ports across the Saint-Laurent River, we will encourage silo development. Each port wants to be the best. So I want to have the best system. I want to have the best solution to be sure that I drive the show. We say, no, guys, you don't have to be the best. What we need to achieve is really having the same standard of data, of information that we need to share all together to have this information to take decision and strategy. So, and we also have to, in Canada, we are really lucky because we have a really huge startup ecosystem. That's fantastic. And sometimes they did really interesting projects. But on the long term, what is important for the customer? What is important for the client? That's really the long term, the stability. And right now, one of the issues with our startup system, we cannot have stability on the time. So we have to support this organization to be sure that we invest right. And, if I am a port, it's a big investment, right? And they need to have some ROI, return of investment. So that's why it's important to work on that. Okay, second point, because time is flying. Second point, all around intermodal. I mentioned in my introduction, we have all the transportation system here. So intermodal, it's important for supply chain resilience. And same for there. When you talk with the industry, they say, oh, I'm a supply chain enabler. I think if you're on supply chain, every conference where you go, I'm a supply chain enabler. Right. What does it mean? It means sharing information to increase your fluidity, your resilience, and the communication with the other partner. So, alone, you cannot be an enabler. You enable into an ecosystem. So collaboration is really important. And I have to highlight the project that Mathieu and the Sodes did with the maritime ecosystem to find the real-time operational data that they have to share to improve the fluidity into the St. Lawrence River. Good. Last point, but not least, user experience, performance. Yes, even we move goods, containers, and we know that containers, they don't vote, that's good for politics, but containers, you have shipping line, you have agent, you have client, and they need and they desire services. We never talk about user experience, but in the future, it's going to be really a differentiator for the ports. Yesterday morning, just for a quick info, I took a masterclass on airport design experience, airport customer design experience. Really interesting. The airports would change their mind and put the user performance KPI into the strategic plan, and they have 10% growth revenue because people want to use it, want to go there. And we also have to implement the state of mind into the ports too, and all the ecosystem for people to say, we want to use the St. Lawrence and Great Lakes corridor into our strategy. So to conclude, because one minute. First, we have to accelerate to digitize. Absolutely. We want strong vision about what we want to achieve with the corridor and how we want to use the corridor. Second, we have to integrate with the supply chain, how we can collaborate better to enable the supply chain inside the corridor. And then we have to innovate. Innovate for our customer and innovate to be, a place to be and a place to use. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Magali. And for the point of view of ports, so Larissa Finn for the OPA port. Oh.
It is, okay. Hi, thank you for inviting me today. I'm so thrilled to be a part of today's talk and part of this auspicious panel. My colleagues and I at HOPA are not data scientists by any stretch. We're simply the stewards of the ports of Hamilton and Oshawa and Niagara, and we view our job as really to look for new ways to optimize these national critical trade assets and to look for ways to make Southern Ontario supply chains, in particular within the Great Lakes region, to make those supply chains work as well as they can. And so just very quickly, an introduction to HOPA. We are the largest Canadian port authority within the Great Lakes, and we do manage locations in Hamilton and Oshawa and the Niagara region, ports and multimodal hubs. And we have a portfolio of property that's about 1,400 acres. We're self-funded and we report to our own board of directors. And again, we really do see our mission as building an integrated port and multimodal hub network on the Great Lakes and building resilient supply chains within Southern Ontario. Just a few stats here about our impact as a port and the commodities we handle. Of course, ports within the Great Lakes are primarily bulk ports in Hamilton. Hamilton, you will know, is the steel city. We definitely handle commodities related to steel production, coal and iron ore. Also, Hamilton is the largest export gateway for Ontario-grown grain, so corn, wheat, and soybean. We also handle flour. We have a flour mill. We do flour milling and sugar refining and an oilseed crush facility, as well as imports of fertilizers. And we handle construction materials, structural steel, gypsum, asphalt, and in Oshawa, we handle some cement. At this point, containers are not a big factor within those Great Lakes ports, though there have been some experiments, primarily on the U.S. side. When I go through my talk today, I'm just going to cover sort of our 3 steps into the digitization process as a relatively, as a decent-sized big port in Canada, but on the global stage, a relatively small, and as I say, primarily bulk port. So our first step, visualizing our own data, what we have, and helping ourselves to understand it and use it to make better decisions. Secondly, experimenting with AI for as a first step and seeing what we can do within that context of a bulk port. And thirdly, looking ahead to what can we do, how can we leverage digitization and partnerships to address the broader regional challenges within our supply chain. So that first step, our own data. This is just sort of a quick look at how we are organizing our own information, a few screens from our own Power BI interface, where our people can quickly access information about the commodities, the tonnages, vessel origins, and destinations. We also keep track of cargo loading efficiency so that we can look for anomalies, opportunities for operational improvement, lays the groundwork for potentially investments in infrastructure, identifying the need for new equipment or adjustments in how labor works. Efficiency feeds our reputation in the industry, factors that shippers and shipping lines are considering when they're deciding when and how to move cargo or to invest in new facilities within Canada. I think it's important to remember that everything that comes into port may come in by vessel, but it leaves by truck or the other way around. And so trucks and truck traffic is very much a big part of what we manage at the Port Authority. It is not all about ships. This screen is informed by Atri data, which speaks to truck traffic, helps us identify problem areas and opportunities, again, for efficiencies. We use it to help calculate our CO2 emissions. And we work with our partners at the municipal level to organize to impact traffic planning. The next step is our first experiment with AI. We are implementing an intelligent vehicle management system. This is a project that was supported by the National Trade Corridors Fund. It builds on our existing dashboard. And the project is about AI-enabled cameras at the port gates that can view both license plates as well as learn about the types of truck. Is it a dump truck or a tanker or a hopper bottom truck? What is the flow of those trucks? Where are they accessing and exiting? How long are they there? Is there a need potentially for new staging areas? How are we managing their routing when they're within the port? Is there undue idling times where we could impact those CO2 emissions? The next step, ideally, is enabling this information to be pushed to the cabs so that drivers can make better decisions about when they're coming to the port and better decisions about how they're routing through local neighborhoods, for example, as they come and go from the port. So that's our next step. And then finally, our third phase is sort of this bigger picture connected to our mission about building a multimodal network on the Great Lakes to improve our supply chains in Southern Ontario. This slide has lots of words on it, but the crux of it is Southern Ontario is going to have more people, and those people are going to have more stuff. And so, how do we use our supply chains to anticipate what's going to happen, what the changes those population increases are going to drive. The interior Great Lakes have a really unique opportunity, I think, to serve as inland hubs connected to our coastal ports, including Montreal, to move goods by vessel and by rail away from the after they're cleared in the coastal ports, and relieve some of that pressure and get goods on the best mode of transportation closer to their final destination more often. Also, opportunities for intra-lake traffic, truck ferries, and ships between Canada and U.S. ports, carrying those fast-moving consumer goods a little more often. One of the things we have done is a couple of years ago, we had an opportunity through a Transport Canada-led process to establish a collaboration with the McMaster Institute for Transportation and Logistics that we called Fluid Intelligence, and it provides us access to those data sets that exist outside of the port, so we can understand what's moving by surface transportation that could potentially be moving by water instead, given that marine transportation is more efficient and a more environmentally responsible way to move. Our most recent project has been looking at specific movements between the area around the Port of Oshawa and Durham region and New York State to identify specifically what are the commodity flows that would be good candidates for a migration to a different mode of transportation. And our hope is that we can do access more data sets that will allow us to answer more of these very practical transportation questions and potentially set the stage and make the business case to introduce new marine services within the Great Lakes. And ultimately, that's our goal, is to optimize the modes within the Great Lakes, increase the capacity and resilience of our supply chains in this increasingly congested region, because the more data we have, the more we can share and the better job we can do against that primary mission. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. So we discussed, we will have maybe 3 or 4 questions before the Q&A with you. So to beginning, I'm probably for you, Mr. Dikema. So in your opinion, what is the greatest challenge facing the St. Lawrence Great Lakes system as it strives to establish itself as an essential transport corridor?
Let's see if I got it on. I did. All right. Well, I'm going to take the easy, but I think maybe obvious answer: uncertainty. Uncertainty around what future policies look like. So I'm from that unreliable trading partner to the south. And I will say, it was encouraging to hear someone mention CO2 in a meeting where there's government officials, because we're not supposed to do that in the U.S. now. I think just the tremendous amount of uncertainty around what the future looks like, anytime you're talking about long-running infrastructure investments, when you have that level of uncertainty, it makes it really hard to know how to plan.
Yeah. So, Magali, in your point of view, what is the challenges about it?
Many challenges. And first, I think for years and years, we take this corridor, we take it for acquis. You know, we take it that it's something, it's going to be easy and smooth because we had businesses, we have, goods coming from the ports, coming from the Great Lakes and to the St. Lawrence River, and it was easy, right? So when all is good, why do I have to change? I make money, I have the infrastructure, I can manage my customer. It was so easy. So maybe it was like a Sleepy Beauty for a while, right? We were just good, but now we say, oh, we have really a strategic and an amazing, corridor, amazing infrastructure, and also people. I think it's really important to mention the people working into the industry are amazing. But now, what we are facing, we are on 2025, and we don't have the tools. We don't have the technology. We don't have the data, the trusted data. Trusted data is important because data, we have a lot of data. Can we extract the real value of data, especially for operation? We have to distinguish operation and knowledge, right? For what we are struggling right now, it's really in operation data. So that's why for the industry, it's really a hard thing because, my God, we have 20 years, we have 20 years beyond the others. So we really have to work hard. But at the same time, we are on a crossroad, and we have the huge opportunity to re-onboard on this digitization, on this data sharing and data sharing minded, because we have to change our mind, and also to include different information, like you mentioned of the green emission and all things like that, to promote the corridor. So many challenges at the time, and the uncertainty really, it's really difficult too, for the organization. So how we can help both government, education, advisory, and also organization, how we can help organization just to take a step back, give them information, give them support to stabilize the uncertainty and also work on the future.
Larissa, do you agree about these challenges? In your point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of challenges, and some of them are infrastructure related. I think are well behind in investing in the infrastructure that we need to really take advantage of all of the opportunities that exist. But also, the data piece is a thing we could do better right away. The fact that we don't really understand the end-to-end flows of commodities in and out of Canada, really to the doorstep, and that information is not very, very difficult to access and very difficult to use in practical ways that, where the market could respond with real services that would increase competitiveness and increase efficiency. It's a key that's there for us to pick up very soon. So I think I'm definitely on the same page.
So Larissa, why is so challenging to implement data sharing approach?
I don't think it's a situation that's unique to transportation. I imagine there are a number of players in the system that have proprietary data that there isn't much incentive to share, and I think that there are opportunities through groups like Cyrano to provide the confidence that data is going to be treated appropriately and still provide the market with the kind of access and the kind of answers it needs to real business problems.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Guikema, so in the other context, why is so challenging to implement the data sharing approach between organizations or between sectors?
So like I said, I work a lot with interdependent infrastructure, power, water, sewer, transport. And there could be really large benefits to sharing data between these, but there's a lot of challenges of why that doesn't happen. And I can speak mainly to the US context. One is policy and regulation, that there are policies and regulations that make it extremely hard for a power utility in particular to share their data. There's actually a classification of data, and it's really hard for them to be able to share that data with other people. They also have self-interest not to share data that might show that their performance isn't what we might want it to be. And as soon as you share data about disruption, which is what the other people are interested in, you're exposing yourself. those are two of the big ones. Then I think we also have the issue that data is not stored in the same way. There's not a common data standard. Even among one type of entity, like power utilities all have different ways they're storing this data, let alone if I want a water utility to talk to a power utility, they both speak English. That's about as far as it goes in terms of data standards.
Okay. So Magali, in your point of view, why is so challenging?
Maybe I can take an example. If now I ask you to give me your credit card number and your PIN, are you going to do it? I can take it, right? When we talk about shared data into an ecosystem with different players, with different level of security into data, knowledge about the data, that's the first feeling is, oh my God, you ask my credit card numbers, right? So what we have to do is to find a common goal. What do you want to achieve? What are you looking for with my data? And what's in it for me in the end? If I give you my data, in return, what do I have to help my organization? So first is really collaboration. How, and we are really, it's really interesting, the playfield that we have, the playground that we have into the Saint-Laurent and the Great Lakes area. Okay, what is the common goal? We can imagine three. We want to increase productivity. Okay, how? Which kind of data we can exchange to improve productivity? Then we also want performance, productivity, performance, and satisfaction. Three goals. Now, which data we need? And it's really interesting because if you put the people around the table talking about this situation, they easily can identify 3-4 data. They say, oh, I can share this data. It's not confidential. It's not commercial. But as you mentioned, the language of the data is really different. Yes, they're English, but it's English from Scotland, from USA, from Canada, and from New Zealand. So in the end, you cannot use it. So you have to find a common language to share the data. So really, the challenge is to find a common goal, put the confidence and the trust into the players, and find one standard. And you start with that. And it's interesting because that's what Europe did by the past. Now you can have really advanced sharing information system, but they start with some data, trust, and now they accelerate the integration.
And is technology the answer to all port digitalization questions?
Okay, Marie-Claude, don't record. Yes and no. Because, and I work for a technology company, so I can say that. Technology, sometimes you have people say, oh, technology is going to solve all your issues. Oh, really? What do you know about my issues? I think the first question is, what do I have inside my organization, technology tools that I can use to be more productive? Maybe sometime at the port, you have all the tools you need, but you don't use it on the right way to have the 100% of the performance. So first is really, what do I have, what I want to achieve? After that, yes, technology is a powerful tool, but technology can be really expensive and more expensive. And also, what is really also important for technology, and more, it's on the time. Technology is not for 5 years. You have to think long-term with technology. And the way you implement your technology, your roadmap, is really important. So first is the goal. What do you need? What do you have? Where do you want to go? And then you find the technology, the tools to support your project.
Larissa, is this right?
I think you could have all the technology you wanted, and you would do a good job of analyzing your own operations, but I think that's still just half of the picture. The port's role is to manage its own operations effectively, but to also understand its integration with industry and with the goods moving in and out of the port. And so you can do a good job of your own business, but it's still not the whole picture.
And Guillaume, it's probably the same with your point of view and different sector, right?
Well, I think across a lot of this, technology is a tool to help us achieve something. A lot of it comes down to the people and how do we help them make better decisions, more efficient decisions, more timely decisions. And going back to your last question about sharing data, one place where I have seen it work, and it comes down to people and trust, is that there's a trusted third entity, like Serrano maybe, that can become kind of the clearinghouse for data. We've seen that work in a number of different settings, because if there's that trust that that data is not going to be inappropriately shared or used, I think that can open up a lot of doors too. But on the technology issue, I see it as a tool. And what we really need to be thinking about is the people and the decisions and how can we help them.
Thank you. So, and Julie said that this morning. So ports are either the gateway for exported goods or the exit gates for exports. So how can other transport modes be integrated into this dynamic of numérisation, sorry about that, and promote better making decision making. So probably for Larissa first.
Yeah, sure. It is true that ports are import and export gateways, but they're also highly integrated into the ecosystem of industry in the region. Hamilton, in particular, because we handle primary materials, everything that we deal with, gets used within 100 kilometers of the port itself. And so it's not just the fluidity of goods moving through, but making sure that those industrial ecosystems are optimized, making sure there's land, which is difficult in lots of port cities where the city has grown up around the port. And I think that there's an opportunity there when we look through Southern Ontario, at least, to identify spaces where maybe there has been an industrial transition and we have underutilized industrial lands that have really good multimodal bones to them, to making sure that they are brought back into the maritime system and optimized. We have I think some work to do with Transport Canada on that front, because there's a little bit of skittishness about bringing former industrial lands back into the federal portfolio, or alternatively, maybe there's another answer. And so I think that treatment of ports as integrated into the communities they serve and integrated into those local economies is as important as optimizing that fluidity through them.
Thank you. Magali, to add in this context, so in your point of view, how can other transport integrate this dynamic?
Well, it's really key, right? Because for ports, you need, import and export, and you must play with the other stakeholder of the supply chain. So you play with trucking industry, railroads, freight forwarders, municipalities, because ports are in the middle of city, right? Usually. So it's really, for the fluidity, it's all about information. Information is really key, and it's the most complex thing to do, right? Because, and I like your point said about a neutral entity. When we talk about data sharing in a complex ecosystem with private organization, for having the trust, we need a neutral entity to manage the data. We need a neutral entity for the governance, for the ethics, and to set the goals. Set the goals to support the ports and the partners. And integrated data from several, transportation mode is quite complex. But really interesting, around the world we have example. You mentioned in your introduction IATA. IATA on the air side for the cargo, they introduced one record. They started in 2016, and today they're able to track a salmon from Norway to their final destination into China. From the time the salmon in the box, in the truck, And they have one single number that they track all around the journey into the final customer. So can we do it? Yes. But how they do it? They implement a really strong governance, standards, and each organization stay master of the data. They don't put the data into a system. They share data on a standard and with some API. And for the airline industry, on goods, not passenger goods, it's really powerful. So if they can do it, I think on a maritime system, we can do it too.
So Guillaume, it's complex but possible. Yeah?
It seems like it.
So I think we have time for one question, right? So, yep. So just give us your name, organization, and let's go. The floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Ben Lewis with the Harvard Center for Geographic Analysis. First of all, kudos on this conference. I feel like I may be in the most important conference in the world right now, given current events. So I'm kind of a tech guy. Whenever one builds a system, one needs to know the requirements. I would submit that, based on this morning's conversation, a really nice key requirement here is the ability, if we're looking at a digital twin, right, ability for a policymaker to be able to look at scenarios, to explore flexible pathways to modifications in trade, whatever form that comes in, right? We can get very granular. We can design the heck out of the system. But I would submit that, thinking about the 10 fields of data that might be needed to support that kind of high-level, quick, agile thinking right now would be a good place to start. And if you could even make that work a little bit, you would get support and buy-in for a lot more.
Absolutely. But what we have to know, which data we need. That's the question. What is the vision and what do we need?
That's my question to you.
Well,
what does a policymaker need? I mean, some folks here must have ideas.
Christian, maybe the question is for you. What do you need, Christian? No, well, if you check for the policymaker, we have two things really important. They have to keep the customer, and when I talk customer, that's all the industry happy. And for example, Jean Simard this morning with the aluminium, and for the manufacturer, for example, in Quebec right now, it's really hard. So they need information to support this industry, and at the same time, they need to support. And Julie Gascon this morning mentioned all the infrastructure, how the infrastructure can support. So we have different set of data. We have operational data for manufacturer and for organization, and we have investment data for the infrastructure. So that's two level, different level of information that we have to implement. Happy to discuss more later.
So, Larissa, for comment and probably for Damon, for Christian, do you have a comment about the question?
Well, I would just agree that sometimes it feels more practical and more achievable to start with a problem rather than start with a request for data. And our Oshawa, Durham region, New York State project is a really good example of that. We've gone through the process of trying to solve that particular challenge of using the data sets that we could get our hands on, and then understanding what would have made that better. And one of them was a data set that's owned by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. It does what we need it to do, but it's like 6 years old. And So, it's that kind of thing where we can go back, ideally, one of our next steps is to go to the MTO and say, like, look what we've done. Isn't it great? Doesn't it meet your policy goals to get trucks off Ontario highways? It would be better if you would find a better way of collecting and analyzing this data. So that's the sort of like it's a sort of backwards and practical. Like it's a bite-sized piece of the bigger problem for sure.
Thank you. So, Guillaume, just before we have time for more questions. So, if you have a question for panelists, don't hesitate. So, Guillaume.
The one thing I would add is also there's usually not just one policymaker, right? That there's lots of interested stakeholders even within the policy realm, and they all might be pulling in somewhat different directions. So we need to figure out, okay, what do different groups need and where do we start?
Sorry. Okay. So more question? And I'm so sorry. I said Guillaume, so it's sad. So I'm so sorry about that. I just realized. So I'm so sorry. So more question for Seth, Magali, and Larissa? So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for presentation and time. And thank you for Cyrano to organize this panel. So good afternoon and good discussion for the rest of the afternoon. So my English was okay. So it's probably, so I hope it's my charm, but I'm not sure. So thank you for your time.